Okay, so I'm not there today, but I wanted to be able to still walk you through all the steps for this app. The one thing that I did not finish with you was setting the score back to 0, and then adding these other features to the app. So to set your score back to 0, you'll remember in Designer we had a restart button, so when we click that button we want it to set the score back to 0. Button restart or reset clicking is the event handler that will cause that to happen. When that happens, I'm just going to duplicate a bunch of this stuff because it makes it easier. Work smarter, not harder. Alright, we're going to grab this out of here. First thing we're going to do is set that global score back to 0. We have to update the label as well. Just setting the score, the variable, to 0 does not let the user know that the score has changed. You have to go through and put this on here as well. You could play a restart sound too if you wanted to. That's always a nice touch to add to your apps and games. So that's all that we need to do for that step. Now if we go down, make sure you test that. When you go down, if you look at some of these options for improving your game, one of them was to increase the speed of the sprite as the game goes on. To do that, we need to have another clock that's keeping track of time. So I'm going to go back to Designer, and I'm going to go to my sensors, and I'm going to pull another clock over, and I'm going to name this clock Speed Up Game, so I know which clock it is and what it's doing. And I guess we could leave it at 1,000. That's pretty short. So those are, the interval is in milliseconds. So milliseconds to seconds. There's 1 that equals a second, so that means that 1, 2, 3. Every 1 second it would go faster. That's a little quick for me. Maybe every 5 seconds, so we need 5,000 milliseconds. So I'm going to change this to 1, 2, 3. Every 5,000 milliseconds I'm going to speed up the sprite that's moving. So if I go to blocks, I can then say when this clock fires, so the timer goes off on this speed up game timer, I want to increase the speed of the archer sprite. So let's go to the image sprite and see where we might find a way to speed him up. So there is a speed and there is an interval. I know that if I use the speed it isn't going to work quite the way I want it to. I've looked that up before. So I went to MIT App Inventor and I went and looked at, I wanted to look this up to make sure that I was giving you the right information. So here's image sprite. Image sprite, if we look at the properties, interval is the sprite's position when the milliseconds at which the sprite's position is updated. So that's actually how fast it's moving. The speed at which the sprite moves. We actually want to move the interval, not the speed. So in App Inventor, I'm going to say set speed, and let's take a peek at what speed Archer's already set to. His speed is at 0, which kind of makes no sense, but his interval is 100. Let's increase both the interval and the speed and see what kind of change we get from that. So we'll set his speed to, let's use some math. We'll get speed. and maybe add 5 to it. You'll have to mess around with these numbers to see what you think is going to be the increase that you want. I'm also going to increase the interval when this fires in the exact same fashion. So the interval was actually at 100. So I'm going to maybe double that. So we'll say image sprite. Oh, and we can just duplicate this. Work smarter, not harder. We want interval. And we'll change this to interval plus, why don't we just add 100 to it and see what happens. Now, every time this timer goes off, the speed is going to increase by 5 and the interval is going to increase by 100. I don't know what that's going to do. You're going to need to test that and see what it looks like and then play with these numbers and see what works for what you want for your game. Let's look at the next one. Counting the number of misses, so that's when canvas touched. There is a trick to this one. So, when canvas touched means you miss the sprite. However, the sprite is on the canvas, so we have to set a special thing in here. When canvas touched, we're going to say when canvas touched, and we need to make a new variable, and this variable is going to be called misses, and we'll set it to 0. And we'll count the number of misses that they get. So we'll say we need to go to control, or logic, actually logic will work, or math. So we're going to say in control we need an if, then. If they touch the canvas and there's not a sprite there, then we want it to add to misses, which is the kind of the weird little extra piece that we have to do here. So I'm going to say if any sprite touched equals false, then we'll add to the misses. Otherwise, we're not going to add anything. So we need to look up here where we had some math. I'm just going to duplicate this and I'll change the variable that I'm using. I'm going to say global misses. I got to change this one to misses plus 1. I also need a label for misses in here, so I'm going to need a new label underneath score, and I'm going to rename it. I named it label misses, and I added a text here that says misses and 0, and then I changed it to match the format of my other label. Then I need to update that label. So anytime they miss, we need to update the label so we know how many times we've missed. I'm going to duplicate and then just use the drop-down menus to change what I did for the label for score, which is updating the variable and then setting the text in there. So we're going to say label misses to misses and global misses. So that's going to check yours. It's going to check for a miss, so not touching a sprite and touching the canvas. Make sure this works. If this doesn't work, take a look and see if there's any code in here that you think needs to be changed. The next one that I'm going to do with you, I'm not going to do the last one. I'm only going to do C. D you can try on your own if you want to. Adding another sprite is a diversion. This one's pretty simple. All you need to do in Designer is add that other sprite. So I'll go to my drawing and animation drawer, I'll add the sprite, and then I'll do all the things I need to do. Upload the file, change the name. So I have changed the height and the width and the name and added my donut on here. Now I'm going to go over to my blocks, and I need to repeat what I did for my Archer, Move Image Sprite Archer. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and duplicate this and move it down so it's out of the way here. And we're going to name this Move Sprite Donut. And we're going to say donut, 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 and donut. Everything should be the name of whichever sprite you're trying to move. I'm going to have this move at the same time as the first clock, so whenever this clock goes off, I'm going to call the procedure to move the donut as well. They'll just both move at the same time. You can add a second clock and have it move at a different interval if you want to. I also want to say when image sprite donut is touched, we're going to take away a point. So I'm going to duplicate my image sprite Archer touched, event, handler, and I'm going to say when image sprite donut is touched, we're going to set the score, and I'm going to pull this out. I need to minus. You could add -1, or you can do, if this makes more sense to you, go in here and say global score -1. And now I lost that piece. There it is. -1. And toss that other piece in the garbage because I don't need it. And that'll update the score with that negative. I did not mean to duplicate. I meant to trash that. Delete. Delete. Okay. And then I would play a different sound. So maybe I would play a sound that made a sad sound when I made a mistake. So that's all the code for the first 3 plus the updating when you reset the game. When you're done today, so before the hour ends, I want you to take a screenshot of all of your code. You might need to use the Control and minus button to zoom out so you can see more of the code. You also might just need to take a couple screenshots because it's a lot of stuff in here. Put it together so it looks nice. Get a snap of all of these blocks. Also, please take just a screenshot of the viewer and the components right here. I don't need any of the other stuff, but this part and this part I'd like to see to make sure you named everything. Yeah, so I will see you on Tuesday, and I hope you have a good Monday.